Hey everybody, welcome back. This is the start of episode 5. I've done quite a bit on here. Still plinking away with stuff, but you'll see some changes. I went through with my label printer and printed out some labels and then fixed them on here just for future reference other than myself. I did go through and connect or run the DC power. So power from my 24 volt and power from my 5 volt power supply comes up through and comes into this terminal block set. As I noted in previous episode, that I moved my AC up here simply because there's just did not need all those connections. I still probably won't need all of these connections, but for the most part I have a lot of items already ran. They're not connected. Nothing's connected to the C82 or the M26 expansion board. But these are the 5 and the 24 volt terminal blocks. I have them jumpered out, so each block, there's 5 blocks, will give me a total of 10 connections for each one. So I can split and run those off if I need to. But mainly the M26 needs a external 5 volt input, and the C85 needs a 24 volt input on here. Excuse me, that's the C82, not 85. I said I went through everything, put my labels on there, labeled it for the limit switches, which that relay was a pump. I moved all of the grounds that feed from this power supply up to here, added some of the leftover terminal blocks up here, so I have a whole ground section on here. I also went ahead and ran the 24 volt power leads to the motors, or the motor drivers. That's going to come from the motor's power supply, 24 volt motor's power supply, and comes up through and goes to each one of the motor drivers. I did put a 4 amp fuse in line. The actual motor's power supply has a breaker up here, but I did put independent fusible links in here, and right now I'm going to start it out at 4 amps. I think that should be more than adequate. So we'll see, but that's 4 amps, and they're just a standard 5 by 20 millimeter fuses. You unscrew them, and then the little glass fuses inside there. I added my labels onto my tool changer ATC for the tools 1 through 4 and the drawbar. So that's all done. Basically the remaining portions is just to go through and do some connections on the actual to the board itself. I need to run the Ethernet cables just to kind of give you a view of how complex it's starting to get. These things are filling up pretty quick. I'm really hoping that there's going to be enough room to tuck, because the Ethernet cables that I have, the Cat 6 cables, are like 3 feet long. So I only need to go from here to here. So the remaining portion is going to be tied up inside here. I mean, I may go through and route them around just to try to spread them out, but for the most part, I got to try to start squeezing these things in here. And then if there's any other cases of items that I may need, hopefully there'll be enough room in there. But for the most part, you can see it looks really clean. I'm really happy with that so far. So at this point, we're going to get started on doing some connections. Basically, I have all of the AC solenoids. These are the leads going to the AC solenoids and the power drawbar. All I need to do is make a power wire coming from the AC common to go back to the actual M26 for the voltage in, and then these will get wired to the normally open positions. So on here, this is pins or relay 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I'm going to put my tool changer number 1 into relay 1, number 2 for number 2, etc., all the way to relay 5, which will be the power drawbar. And then after that, we have the coolant pump So this one here would be 24 volts. So relay 6 is going to get a 24 volt line run into it and go in, or it's already ran out actually. So I need to run it in here, and then this will come back and go to the input side of this relay, and that will turn this relay on to function the coolant pump. So what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and pause the vid. Hey everybody, welcome back. We're going to do a little recap on what we have done. As we noted, we're going to start wiring the M26 and the C82. So we'll touch base a little bit on that. So basically on the M26, we needed to bring a 5 volt input and a ground. So we ran from our 5 volt power supply up to that. So we have, now that's what powers the board. I'm assuming all the relays are 5 volts. And we went ahead and wired the solenoids and the coolant pump, the secondary coolant pump relay. So basically this here is a 24 volt line coming in from our terminal block, coming into here and going out to power the relay assembly here to turn the pump on. Then we have our AC common coming in, and then all the rest of the relays are wired in parallel, so it's just looped to that. And then of course these are our power out coming into the solenoids. If you remember in a previous video, all the commons are individual. All of the neutrals were wired in parallel, which comes in and ties into the neutral bus bar on here. Then next was the Ethernet cables. Ran the Ethernet cables. These the wire management is beginning to get pretty full, especially when these Ethernet cables are about 3 feet in length. So I had to try to put those in here, and on one of them I ended up routing most of it in here so it comes in at a different point, simply to try to make some room. On previous videos, if you remember, I know that I ran a Cat 5 cable up to the monitor or the user interface console, whichever you wish to call it. And it was mainly going to be used as my signals. So I removed the outer sheathing on it, and these are the remaining for whatever I plan to do when I add push buttons on there, to be able to have his inputs on here to turn certain functions on. I went ahead and used 2 of the strands. I used the green on here, green for go, and on the PC I had taken the PC apart, and it had a circuit board mounted on-off switch, momentary on-off switch. That's what turns the PC on. And luckily it was well and exposed and a rather large solder points. So I soldered on a set of leads and ran them out of the case. And then so I've tied the green and the green with a stripe leads onto this, and that will go out to the console. So I'll have a remote push button to start this PC from the console once the power has been turned on. I'm going to hold off wiring up the 24 volt motor's power supply, simply because in case I need to take this off, like as I noted in a previous video, the 24 volt motor's power supply mounts over the top of this, so the wire management is concealed underneath it. So there's no need to bolt that on there at this moment. But all my power wire, my 120 volt in and my 3 axis leads are all ready to go. All they need to do is terminated and connected to it once the power supply has been put in place. I have 3D printed the sandwich portion of the console, and I need to machine the G10 plates on my router so I can make the sandwich and then mount the monitor into it and configure out what switches I'm going to need extra, and then go ahead and put those in place in the circuit board. Once I get the spindle motor back in place, then we'll be able to wire up that, because it has its own Hall. It has Hall sensors on it, so the Hall sensors have to come in and wire into this actual driver along with the 3 phases, since it is a brushless motor. And finally, I went ahead and paused the video because I needed to go ahead and connect the Ethernet cable to the limit switches, which brings it into here. The Ethernet cable that goes into the Warp 9, I think it is, smooth stepper, and then comes around and comes into the computer itself. And then of course added the final ribbon cable that goes on there. So that basically completes everything with the C82 and the M26, other than the signal cables, motor power, and the console that needs to be done. So anyways, please like and subscribe. We'll see you on the next one.